I'm John Atack, and here is my wonderful guest, Karen de la Carrière. Hi, Karen.
Greetings, John. John Atack.
John Atack.
Happily married man.
I am, actually. I'm a happily married man.
Found it.
Yeah.
Found his,
Finally.
what Australians delightedly call your mate.
That's it, yes, my mate.
Your significant other.
She certainly is very significant. What can I say? So here we are with the Scientology world in absolute chaos.
Yes.
Danny Masterson's crimes and high crimes come to interview, and they seem to be launching an attack upon Paul Haggis at the same time.
Two rape things going on, one in New York, Paul Haggis, one in Los Angeles. And the odor and smell of the Scientology connection is rampant. Scientology desperately tried to keep the word Scientology out of the thing, but when the women testify, for example, two things jump out. The ethics officer told one of the Jane Does, there's no such thing as rape when you're in a relationship with someone. There's no such thing as rape. There's no such thing as coercive sex. So that was like, I got a call from a couple of reporters. Does Scientology doctrine say there's no such thing as rape? I said, no, it's not in the doctrines, but ethics officers can be loosey-goosey, and they can certainly say that, regardless of whether Hubbard said it or not.
It's, of course, a treasonable act, a high crime, to bring down the reputation of Scientology. And if that means denying that murder, rape, and arson don't exist, then that's what the Scientologists will do, very sadly. Which brings us to our essential topic, which is the fervor with which people believe. And we've seen the scandals in the last 20 years unfolding about child sexual abuse within a variety of churches, the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, the Anglican Church, Baptist churches, the Jehovah's Witnesses, of course. And it fascinates me that, we have numbers. In Australia, the Royal Commission there that investigated found that 500 Catholic priests had abused 8,000 people. And the cover-up within the church, you can see what happens. They're sort of saying, well, we don't want a bad reputation. We believe we have the truth. We believe that it's vital for humanity that our organization survives. So because we have the truth, we're going to lie. Because we have the truth, we're going to conceal the truth. And it reminds me of the Solzhenitsyn novel, For the Good of the Cause, that what people will do to protect some cherished cause, not realizing that, when you're saying, we are restricting human rights and liberties so that there'll be more human rights and liberties, that there's this fundamental paradox. And before we began, you put forward the idea, how is it that people will accept such a thing? And it made me think about a conference I went to many years ago, and I'd asked that a forensic psychologist, a police psychologist called Brian Tully should be invited, and he was. And he gave just this great talk. Now, his job was getting white-collar criminals to confess. And he said that the fascinating thing to him after some years of doing this work was that he heard the same story so often that somebody would say, well, I was asked to backdate a contract to yesterday. That's how it started. Just some small thing. And once you've done that, anybody who's watched enough movies about the mob knows that once you've committed that small act, then you are caught. You are in the game, as they say. You will now, if you refuse the second request, they'll say, well, we'll turn you in for the first thing you did. So you have to do it. And people get in deeper and deeper. And one can see how that happens in a criminal situation. It's harder to see how it happens in the context of a religion. But it does happen. And in Scientology, I started talking about increments of dissonance, you know, that you accept something and you go, well, yeah, when Mike Rinder talks about arriving at the Apollo in 1973, and I believe you were there too, and he's saying, you know, this is, Hubbard has talked about the ideal scene. This man has the brilliant administrative technology. So this is going to be the most efficient and most wonderful place in the world. And he finds that he's on a cattle ferry in a dormitory with 60 stinking men in the dark, and that the ideal scene, Hubbard couldn't care less about the conditions of his followers, which of itself seems a terrible contradiction. This man who's telling us that he was Maitreya, the future Buddha who would bring all of humanity to enlightenment, but he couldn't care less about people, and you know, has been throwing them overboard into sewage and, as you pointed out, off Corfu. This paradox, this contradiction, it's somehow that we in our minds have some ideal that we are headed towards, and we put the blinkers on and ignore the reality of the situation. It happens very often in military situations where people commit horrific crimes, somehow caught up in the moment, somehow believing that this is righteous in some way. You look at Generation Kill, which was a remarkable piece of drama, and I watched those through about the Iraq War and about the first unit that went in, the first Marine unit that went in, and I watched all the way through and thought, yeah, but this is a liberal perspective, you know, this has been slanted. And then it finished with a documentary where they interviewed the actual company that it had been about. And you realize, so there are places in there where they're trying to stop airstrikes on innocent villagers that the infantry have called in. And they're saying, but there's nobody in there who's you know, objecting to our presence. There is no fire being taken. And yet an infantry commander said, well, let's just destroy that village. So there's this sense of the other. There's this sense that, you know, my side are the good people and your side are the evil people. And in Scientology and in many other groups, there is that sense that anybody who's opposed to us, when Mike Rinder and we only met once during his time in Scientology, and he came here to the village where I live, he visited it, along with, you know, a $3,000 a day lawyer and half a dozen people, you know, in SEAL uniforms or what have you, to seek to intimidate me. And he said when the first talk I had with him on this channel, that he would quite willingly have destroyed me. I seemed like a perfectly decent person, but there was this simplistic notion that I was opposed to Scientology and therefore I should be killed. You know, I should be eliminated, erased, expunged, extirpated. And when people deteriorate into that kind of mindset, they give away their humanity.
Yes.
Wanting to, because they have some idea that, you know, if we just slaughter all of the Germans, or we just slaughter all of the Australians, or then paradise will descend upon earth. And these are stupid notions. And how that's come about is through the manipulation of our internal reality. I keep coming back to this. I haven't really read Kant. It's a bit too elaborate for me, but I'm told that he said in the 18th century that there is the physical world outside, but we each of us live in our own interpretation of that world.
Yes.
L. Ron Hubbard said the same thing and credited it to L. Ron Hubbard, in fact. His study of philosophy having been rather slender as far as I can tell, he perhaps didn't realize that this was an idea that had been around for a couple of hundred years by the time he revoiced it. But it is very true that our interpretation of the world, our map of reality, is where we live. And if your internal reality has been twisted so that you think that anybody who disagrees with Ron Hubbard is diabolic, evil, a suppressive person, then you'll be willing, by believing absurdities. I quote this in almost every conversation I have with people. Voltaire said, those who believe absurdities will be willing to commit atrocities. And that is how our willingness moves, that if we are to be individuals, mature adult individuals, we have to take responsibility for our beliefs. And for me, the belief that was put forward by Socrates, by Montaigne, the 16th century brilliant man, and indeed by Charlie Chaplin, they all said, I am not a patriot for Athens, France, or America. I'm a patriot for humanity. You know, it is the human race that is significant. And as people become divided and say, well, you're my enemy because you don't believe what I believe, then
there is no humanity in Scientology. No.
It becomes savage.
Debbie Cook testified in court. One of the moments where she realized she was up at Int Base, she was summoned there. I witnessed a punishment of a guy, I'll send the name to Spike, Danish guy, being forced to lick a bathroom floor with his tongue. His jaw probably ached after 2 hours. But this was, you see, there is such a thing as religious discipline, which the cult says in law courts, but to lick a bathroom floor with his tongue was the David Miscavige punishment. And you know, the guy did this. He's now out, but he went back on post and stayed in the Sea Org at least 2-3 more years.
Were you on the Apollo when I think it was Charlie Riesdorf pushed a peanut round the deck?
His 2 daughters were messaging, they were weeping, and Hubbard was. He had to push a peanut with his nose, crawling like a dog on the decks of the Apollo. No, there's not only humanity, there is no humanity, there's vengeance, hatred, punitive actions off the charts, like throwing people overboard into sewage for a minor error. So Hubbard had this, no wonder he said towards his life's end, he had SPVT he couldn't get rid of. There was such suppressive tendency. The dark side of Hubbard was horrific. And those around him, because they'd had a win or considered him a genius, whatever. So let me just rewind for 1 second.
Absolutely.
Back to the trial of the, this is like, in terms of notoriety, it's the O.J. Simpson trial of Scientology, the Danny Masterson. It's just, the media just love it. It's here, there, and everywhere. The Daily Mail has a full-time reporter in the court. Wow. And so it's in the British, every day. Oh, yeah. Now, one thing that this girl was told by the ethics, there is no such thing as rape. Another Jane Doe was told, you're currently a living girlfriend. You're getting your rent free. You're getting your food free. Get in your exchange. Have sex on demand. Almost like a hooker arrangement, right? You're getting free food. You're getting free rent. So surrender to his needs and give him sexual intercourse whenever he wants, however he wants, in what position he wants. Obey because of your free food and rent. This was electrifying to hear in court. I mean, you hear me say it and it's now hearsay and all that, but when a live person is saying it in court, it's all the reporters are all there looking at it. And I was asked by another reporter if Scientology doctrines feel that you should obey and surrender and give your body because you're getting free. So I just want to tell you, we're on a rewind here. I've never told this to any media. It's a little anecdote I've never, ever shared, ever.
Okay. That's prepared the ground well.
I was working at Office of Special Affairs as Heber's assistant.
Heber was your husband and the supposed president.
International president of Scientology. And this mission came in. 3 or 4 of them from RTC, and they were ordered to whip us into shape.
And RTC is the Religious Technology Center, governing body of Scientology, so we're told.
And David Miscavige's execution arm.
Yeah.
People who would just do what he said.
Mm.
And I remember a 6'7" guy called John Jones slamming the desk, trying to terrorize me, and said, "You haven't got one psychiatrist in jail, and you're the head of CCJ. Why haven't you got one psychiatrist in jail?" And I looked at John Jones and I said, "You know, they're medical doctors, licensed. Like, it's not that easy to just pluck a medical doctor." Okay, that's a side issue. Here's the real story.
Yeah.
Heber and I had been married by now for 10 years. Mm. And we had never snitched on each other, even though in Scientology, it's always a 3-party marriage. You, your spouse, and the Church of Scientology, cult of Scientology. You're supposed to report everything. Wives report if a husband said he had a fantasy or a dream of sleeping with 2 women. Whoa, this is reported to ethics. But if the wife really got angry with him and wants to punish him, she'll do CCs, carbon copies.
Yep.
And now it becomes a broadcast.
Public knowledge. Yeah.
Ethics officer Freewinds, ethics officer AOLA, RTC, OSA investigations, RTC investigations, David Miska. It goes on and on and on and on. So 20 people, when she clicks the send button on her computer, learn what her husband privately told her as pillow talk.
Yeah.
This is the Church of Scientology. This is how it's organized. We're going to get your secrets.
Yeah.
And if you step out, we've got the dirt your wife or husband told us. We got this all on file. Every word you say is filed and cross-filed. Okay. So here's my story that I did the big song and dance. Because this mission was ordered to whip us into shape, Heber was locked in a room for 6 hours. And he wasn't going to be let out till he had reported me. He was ordered to just give the dirt on me. And in one report, you're supposed to CC the person you target, but I was never allowed to see the reports.
Okay.
Again, this was all hidden. In one report, Heber kind of mentioned that I was not being willing to have sex as much as he wanted, or I don't know if the report was twisted. It sort of seems unlike Heber to say something like this. But I was hauled in by one of the missionaries, Carol Martiniano, and she ordered me. The reason I'm tying this in with the current
I get it.
This girl was ordered. She ordered me. What's up with this? You're his wife. You are to do your wifely duties. This is an RTC missionary ordering the quantity of my sexual activity. You gotta. Of course, they would let their hair down and talk to an OSA. You have so many clearances to belong in OSA. you are so trusted that RTC feel they can tell an obedient, subservient OSA staff member one level below them anything. You're in. So Carol Martiniana ordered me to have more frequent sex with Heber. And it took me a while to process what I was listening to. I've never shared this anywhere on any video. Carol Martiniano was on an RTC mission with David Miscavige's authority to order you now. This is the order. Obey. Any comments, John?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's an appalling idea that the idea that because if we wind back, you are somebody's wife and you keep the house and they come home, that you have to be an obedient slave to them. It's not acceptable in any way. It's a disgusting and despicable idea. It reminds me of the time in this country where, which is thankfully quite a long time ago, where if you didn't get on with your wife, you could take her to the market and sell her. This actually happened.
Wow.
And that contempt for humanity, for any kind of rights. In this country, since 2015, we have a Coercive Control Act, and people have been prosecuted under it, where in an intimate relationship, it's recognized that coercion is not simply physical, that there is psychological coercion and somebody can be pushed into a subservient position. That is now against the law here. So the idea that you're meant to lie back, and here would be thinking of England, of course, and it's just, where are these people coming from? What do they feel about other human beings? If they think there is no such thing as rape, if they think that women should just obey orders, or anybody should just obey orders, and the idea that you can have a sexual relationship with somebody that is some kind of mechanical, robotic thing, it's not to do with love and affection. It reminds me of there was a point where there was a guy called Harvey Jakes who was the commanding officer at Manchester, and a friend of mine was on the staff there, and he came home and he said he pulled all of the staff into a muster and said, "You're not smiling enough." Now, where do you take that you're not being genuine enough? The conditions should be there, that in a loving relationship, and of course in the situation you were in with Heber, you probably had no time to do anything anyway. It's a terrible idea. It's an awful idea, and it again is down to this manipulation of internal reality, where somebody is telling you it's your duty, it's your obligation to do that, and that's not a way to.
But when I heard this, it triggered the earlier similar, because I was ordered to have more sex with Heber by an RTC missionary. And this came flat up in this court where the ethics officer ordered the girl to perform sexually whenever Danny Masterson wanted it. He was a sort of celebrity at a show. So now mine was 30 years ago, but the flavor and fingerprint didn't change. Ordering your performance sexually. And so let me give you why the Danny Masterson case is so sensational. 3 rape victims all had the same fingerprint, the common denominator. They were all, some of them, one of them wasn't even a girlfriend, just met at the swimming pool, whatever, given a drink and really pushed it. Hey, take this drink, try this. They swallow it and they get a little fuzzy. Their mental determination starts wafting, becoming blurry. And they're dragged up to his bedroom and sexual intercourse occurs violently. Now, Danny Masterson had a horrible moniker ID called Donkey DJ.
Donkey
And
what? Sorry, donkey.
Donkey Punch DJ. A donkey punch. You may not know this word. I never heard of the word.
Oh.
A donkey punch is when you're slammed in the anus so violently that your muscles contract, and that's supposed to give more pleasure sexually. It's
To the person who's raping you.
Donkey punch. Yeah. They want this contraction because apparently it gives more sensations, whatever. But these girls, the fingerprint was they were bleeding anally after, and the donkey punch was slap on and on. This was to the point of orgasm. I know I'm being very explicit here, but it's all explicit in court. And these girls, one after another. So the strategy of the defense was, they're in cahoots. They talk to each other. They cross-pollinated, and they all have a civil suit. They're just looking for money. And then, listen to this. Today, Jane Doe 4 appeared on the stand. I haven't even read the transcript.
No.
She never wanted money. She wasn't she never knew that she wasn't in cahoots because she barely knew any of that. She didn't. The three Jane Does, she was not talking to them. She wasn't plotting with them. And she's not seeking money. Yet she had the same fingerprint, the same common denominators,
modus operandi.
The same thing happened. Drink and the violent sex. So now, the defense fought tooth and nail to not let her testify. So now they're changing it to, rather than they're just in cahoots looking for money, the defense strategy is, it was consensual. It wasn't rape. They wanted it, man and woman. So here's a cult that touts its technology, especially its confessional technology. And it makes people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, on and on and on. But they had Danny Masterson in for 40 years while he was doing, there's probably another 20, 30 girls. Not everyone wants to come forward and testify in court about such conduct and how their body was violated. He probably did it many more times than the 4 who've come forward. Oh yeah, there are 3 more, but they weren't included in. Anyway, where's the church cult technology? They allowed, Danny Masterson was a Scientologist for 40 years. No matter how much the church wants to keep out of this, this is one of their own.
Yes.
They had him for 40 years. They praise and brag on their technology. And this is the conduct of one of their own. Any comments, John?
Yeah, this is a group which, according to Ron Hubbard, is the most ethical group on the planet. And that leaves me in despair about the other groups, if this is as good as it gets.
Yes.
And as you say, it's likely that there will be women who don't want to come forward because they don't want to have their lives ripped apart in public.
Yes.
They don't want to be cross-examined by, a brutal defense attorney who's there to trash their lives. And of course, you're under oath, and probably most of us have done something reprehensible in our lives. And especially if they're former Scientologists, of course, they know that everything reprehensible they've done has been recorded, not just written down anymore, not just recorded as a sound recording, but filmed, in these private auditing or counseling sessions. But you also have the factor that we know that without any shadow of a doubt that over the decades, Scientology has covered up crimes. And it shocked me when I started investigating in the early 1980s. There were just so many people who had been harmed and damaged. And the cover-ups were incredible. And because I lived through that, particularly suicides, Lee Johnston, Stephen Crane, James Stewart back in 1968 in Edinburgh. And then with Lisa McPherson.
They ordered her files destroyed. They ordered her folders destroyed, and all the SEAL members obeyed.
Yes.
To cover up her death. And
so what we would suppose is that there are active members of the International Association of Scientologists who are, of course, being told that they should not testify, and that if they do testify, then they will no longer be active members of the IAS. And this, for me, is a despicable situation, because the police should be, the FBI should be investigating this. There is no doubt that there should be a full-scale investigation in terms of the obstruction of justice that has, kept this case. It's been some time actually getting it to trial, and it is such an evil that a powerful organization, although it's a small organization now with perhaps 20,000 contributing members, that's still a lot bigger than my household, 20,000 people. And they've got a couple of $1 billion, and they can rain down this pressure on people.
Yes.
So I think the issue of rape, the issue of misconduct against underage people, this idea of 14-year-olds auditing adults who then talk about the bizarre sexual things they've done and enjoy doing that and are paying to do that, so we're told. And the issue of human trafficking, that so many people have been moved around the globe, and the severe consequences, that I wondered. I left in 1983, and the year before, in May 82, there were hearings in Clearwater. And I read the transcripts of those hearings in 1984. And I was stunned by what I was reading. I mean, there's a clear trail where Hubbard has ordered confidential counseling folders to be gone through, a folder error summary, for information to be pulled out that can be used against a guy called Ernie Hartwell. And his wife, Adele Hartwell, testified, and the guy who'd been sent after him, working then for the Guardian's office, testified. You got this whole story. I found it incredibly hard to believe that this organization that I belonged to had such a sinister core, that everything that I'd been told, about how ethical and wonderful this organization was the opposite of the truth. This was actually I wrote a paper called Scientology, Religion or Intelligence Agency. And the truth is that it was always an intelligence agency. It was always a way of protecting Ron Hubbard. So
let me jump in here and let the world know. I was on technology lines for years, decades of my life. There is no such thing as priest penitent privilege.
No.
What you say in any counseling, if you join Scientology and give them, bare your soul, that can and will be used against you in committee of evidences, in hate pages, in retaliation. What you give them, which you think is therapy, is ammunition to blackmail you and to retaliate on you and to hold you in the flock. scared of departure because of the dirt they have on you. You are not in therapy thinking that your secrets are private. And I listed at least 150 people that have access to your folder. That included all of RTC can summon it, all of OSA can look at it, all of CMO can look at it, all the FESs through the ages that'll look for errors, all the DFPs that will assign you, all the auditors you've ever had. You totaled all this number up, and what you thought was talking to one person is 150 people who read and smoke and know your deepest secrets. Plus, in the last 20 or so years, everything is recorded with hidden cameras.
Yeah.
You think you're alone with the auditor? Not even Tom Cruise. Everything is on camera. There's one camera on you, and there's one camera on the e-meter. And your voice, word for word, is recorded in Scientology tape recorded files forever. No such thing as privacy. Wake up, giving hundreds and hundreds of dollars to be on record of your most private secrets.
And those of us who have dared to speak out, and I've been doing it off and on for 39 years now, do so in the knowledge that whatever we confessed, whatever we admitted to, is there and can be used. One of the most frequent things that I've heard from ex-members who've approached me is that they would like to speak publicly about the horrors and the indignities that they saw, but they're scared that their children will find out about their sexual peccadillos when they were younger, or find out about, that they took LSD or whatever. And that's even without the threat of anything happening, the realization that you've revealed this material in the attempt to become a more ethical human being yourself. You wouldn't reveal it otherwise. To cleanse yourself, to be contrite, to achieve some sort of reconciliation, to then realize that this organization had a completely other intention. And this, I think, is a very important notion. In Scientology, Hubbard talks about intention, counter-intention, and other intention. These are very important concepts. And to understand that what Ron Hubbard was doing, his intention was an other intention, was a counter to our intention, and that what he was claiming to do was the exact reverse. I mean, the first version of Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky, or one of the earlier versions anyway, there were several, was called Hubbard Through the Looking Glass. And the publisher felt that I think there were two other books that had looking glass in the title, and they didn't want to use it. So Russell Miller's book, which is absolutely based upon my book, and which is fine, it references in the bibliography Hubbard Through the Looking Glass. And it gave him about half of the material in his book. He did great research. I worked with him for 1.5 years and was his only paid researcher. But Hubbard Through the Looking Glass, that moment when you realize that Scientology is in fact the opposite, the exact opposite of what you believed it to be. It isn't a way of liberating humanity. It's a way of enslaving humanity. Yeah. As Hubbard said in 1952 in the Philadelphia Doctorate course, we have ways here of making slaves. He then said, let's make sure that none are made. But that was not his intention. His intention was very much to enslave us and have us dependent upon him. And the reality is, he was not an enlightened being. He was not a Buddha. He was not a nuclear physicist. He was not a war hero. He hadn't studied with any gurus in Tibet, Mongolia, India, or China, all of which are claimed in the Scientology literature. He was a very sick human being. He was a sadist. He was a control freak.
But what is so mind-boggling is how he got so many to swallow and believe the con. That is like just completely. Let me give you two quick examples. Lisa Marie Presley, the daughter of Elvis Presley, was going to testify that she was being asked to persuade one of the rape victims, Jane Doe, to not go to LAPD and report it. So she was being asked to get herself involved in obstruction of justice, which is a felony, blocking a rape victim from going to LAPD to report that Danny Masterson raped her. See how, you see, and who asked her to do this? Sea Org members, people who pledge to join a religion, to go higher spiritually, trying to protect just for good. This is all Scientology's obsession on good public. They want good PR. See how Scientology was deeply embroiled in this. They asked the daughter of Elvis Presley to try and block a Jane Doe from going to LAPD to report a rape, not a little shoplifting that he took, you know, did a little fudging on him, you know, didn't report to me, on a violent donkey punch rape, thrusting his penis in her anus till she bled. And Lisa Marie Presley was asked to block and use her powers of persuasion, because she was super friendly with this Jane Doe, to block him. This is the Church of Scientology's action. I'm so glad we're doing this, and so glad we're truly putting it out there.
Let me give you another and horrifying example of this. This happened in Australia. The man responsible confessed and was convicted. So there is no doubt this happened. So a 6-year-old girl whose stepfather was a Scientologist, mother was a Scientologist, she was repeatedly sexually assaulted by this man over a period of 4 or 5 years. It's all on record in Australia. She went on television there, and her testimony was heard by the Australian Royal Commission, and she was paid compensation. So there is no doubt this happened. At the age of 11, one of her friends, her mother, sort of realized that something was going on, and she was taken to the police. She made a statement to the police about what was happening to her. Then a woman who's is it Jan Eastgate?
Yes, head of CCHR, head of the subdivision of Scientology that attacks psychiatry. She was the head honcho, the president of it.
She was. And the group you mentioned, CCHR, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. And just that human rights part of it, she went to this 11-year-old child who had been repeatedly raped by an adult and convinced her to withdraw the report. For the next 5 years, this child was in the household of that man. It was well known to Scientology what he had done, and they did absolutely nothing to protect this child, and everything to protect the rapist, the child molester, the criminal. Some justice has been seen. As I say, the man confessed. He's been convicted. But there is no, in Scientology, you're told that what you're doing is taking responsibility. You're becoming a responsible person. But the opposite is true. We are traveling through the looking glass. What's actually happening is that you are becoming criminally irresponsible for the good of the cause, for the reputation of Ron Hubbard. And every case that comes out, any case that comes out, there are 9 or 10 other cases that we will never hear about. because the people are too ashamed, too scared, and they don't. So the thing I would say is, if you can come forward, do. If there is something you want to say about Scientology, you can do so anonymously. There are many websites out there where you can talk about it. It is important for people to know that this creature, which pretends to be working for the good of humanity, is in fact an entirely destructive organization which seeks to psychologically and physically enslave people, to drain away whatever cash resources they have. I mean, I talked with a guy a few years ago, and he here in England, and he told me that he was having to work 2 jobs and would have to work 2 jobs, I think, for the next 30 years to pay off the loans he had taken to give money to Scientology. One of those loans was for, I think it was £35,000, about $50,000, so that they could put up a new building. And he was told that in return, he would have a parking space at this new building for all eternity. And I said to him, look, we can do something about this. And he was sort of, yeah, and then what will happen to me? What kind of retribution will I suffer? So he had given his life. He was working 2 jobs so that he could pay back money he'd borrowed.
Just
so David Miscavige could have another org building, another empty org building. It's time to speak out. I started doing it in 1983, and eventually, somewhere about 20 years later, other people started to join in en masse because of the internet, because of the protection of anonymity. And the situation that I think the balance has now tipped, and Scientology, we need to focus, I think, on just one thing, and that is, how are we going to help the people who are trapped inside?
Yes.
How are we going to, I know that you're somebody who's done a tremendous amount to help people as they've left, and you've done so fairly privately and secretly because you're a very good person. But we need to be looking at that. How can we help people to recover psychologically from the damage they've suffered?
Well, there's the Aftermath Foundation now.
Yeah, exactly.
And anyone who leaves now isn't thrown in the wilderness. If they were staff, they could be CO or simply 2.5-year, 5-year contract in any satellite. They can just contact the Aftermath Foundation, who will get them a job, will get them driver's, all the basic IDs that they need.
Security, yeah.
You don't even have a driver's license in this year. Get them an apartment, get them absolutely functional in the outside world. So there's no fear of, what will I live under a bridge? Will I be homeless? Go straight to the Aftermath Foundation. The theme of this has been very good, John. We're looking at how the indoctrination or the fervor to protect Scientology and push Scientology overrides all common sense. And I wanted to push in one more anecdote, because Paul Haggis is in New York fighting for his reputation and repute on the rape charges. And Tommy Davis, who was the spokesman that replaced Mike Rinder when Mike Rinder was busted, he asked a Scientologist to do a burglary and break into Screen Actors Guild in West Los Angeles, Screen Actors Guild, huge building. And to access the files of Paul Haggis to get dirt. People have personnel files with all kinds of data. So the spokesman of the church, who's being run directly by David Miscavige, is asked to commit a burglary. This is a Scientologist who was asked to do this. So a spokesman Scientologist asked another Scientologist to do burglary into Screen Actors Guild to get dirt on Paul Haggis. Now, the Scientologist doesn't go, whoa, you're asking me to commit a crime. We're discussing this, John. The mind of Scientologist is, oh, it's an honor that I'm being asked to save Scientology's repute. Do you see how the indoctrination can change and make you believe that you're not committing a crime? You're
through the looking glass.
Doing a good thing through the looking glass. Beautiful sentence.
Yeah, and Jerry Armstrong, when I first met him in 1984, and we became friends, he had some very wise, notions about what he'd been involved in. And one of the things he said, in Scientology, you have the emotional tone scale, and we're all meant to be at some level on this emotional tone scale. And he said, if you look at the Sea organization, the tone level of the Sea organization is fear. It's not the enthusiasm that Hubbard promoted from 1950 onwards. It's fear. People who are always worried about being reported on, always worried about having a negative thought that they shouldn't have. So instead of them becoming, superhuman, extraordinarily competent human beings, they're actually being suppressed into this state of obedience, which is just despicable. I mean, having seen the extremes of that, you lived and experienced the extremes of it, where people were put onto the rehabilitation project force, and if they did not follow an order immediately, they'd have to run a lap. And
usually minimum was 5 laps, 10 laps.
Okay.
Laps for me, when I was in the RPF, a lap is, the Fort Harrison has a circular 4-story garage of parked cars, and you had to run nonstop up 4 winding. They were quite elongated. They weren't short, because each were allowing 50 to 100 cars. So you had to run to the top and then run down and run to the top and run 5 times or 10 times, 10 laps, whatever the penalty was. And you had to do it right now.
And if any hesitation, and the amount of laps is doubled.
Yes.
So,
oh boy, the control. John,
you mentioned something before we were talking about Leah Remini having made some sort of statement that suggested to you that she might have read Blue Sky. And I just wanted to say that I was actually in touch with her before any of the Aftermath shows were done.
Oh, nice.
I've read Troublemaker, which I think is an excellent book. It's one of the important books by a former member. Of course, I think Mike Rinder's topped most of them with his Billion Years. A remarkable book. But nonetheless, I really like Troublemaker. So I found a way of communicating with her and wrote to her and sent her a copy of the book. And I had a full-page handwritten letter come back from her. And I hope that it was in some way useful in informing the work they did in exposing Scientology to millions of people, the work that she and Mike Rinder did together. Quite remarkable.
You see, one thing about Scientology, they are so predictable because they cannot change, and they do not change, and they'll never get ethics change or they are stuck. And therefore, you can predict their actions. You can predict that they will fair game you if you speak up. I'm just giving an example. You can predict it, right?
Yeah, well, because you have policies that say this is how you must do.
Exactly.
And that's how they function.
Froze that in time in the deep freeze with keeping Scientology working. Every word had to be applied and not changed and not altered, and it's a high crime to not keep Scientology working. Blah, 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 blah. I want to end on a high note. Remember in the last video, I showed you the Karen Bass ad.
Yeah.
This congressman who opened, And yesterday was the voting, and I
Mm.
was watching it. I'm going to send Spike. I got a big vote Caruso on my front lawn,
Mm.
and I've been watching it. And yesterday, he was just creeping along with 1,500 more votes. That a win is a win. You're higher, you win. And then I just checked on it before our show, and he was 12,500 votes ahead of Karen Bass. This is Rick Caruso, who right till voting day kept running those ads where Time magazine says this is a ruthless global scam. It kept showing up and showing up, different. I know that Scientology's freedom media and all tried to slime him and attack him. And his campaign didn't give fiddlesticks. They kept running the ad. And what a gift this was, huh? You and I keep going. We try to enlighten public. And then you get a billionaire real estate developer out of the blue sky. He spent $1 million on his ads. No, more than $1 million.
More than $1 million.
What am I talking about? Jeez. $100 million of his money has gone to TV stations to run his ads.
Wow.
And
he could have given me some of that,
$100 million.
I'd have settled for just 1 million,
Yeah. So my fingers are crossed for Caruso, who stepped out of nowhere. Personally, apparently had some external family horrible experience, and he is exposing the cult life. None of us could ever have a budget to be on every channel.
Give him my email address, I'd be very happy to.
I will go to his victory celebration, John, and I will tell him. Okay.
Yeah.
So, John, we did our time, and I really look forward to seeing you. You were magnificent as usual.
So,
happy married man now, John.
Happily married man, yes.
You have good karma ahead of you.
I hope so. Yeah.
You really do. You really do. Your next 20 years will be the best ever, John. Big hug to you.
Likewise.
Thank you all for listening, especially those who listened all the way through and absorbed the words of wisdom of John Atack.
Yeah, of John Atack. And as Eric Theodore Cartman said, put $1 in the box. So Patreon would be very useful to us.
Please
and we will continue. And I mean, if Rick Caruso is watching, put $1 million in the box. Thanks so much, Karen. See you again in a month's time.
Yes. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, John. Love to you. Bye-bye.
Likewise.
This day and this new church of Scientology is an exciting moment because I know your goal and your commitment is truly to make a difference. That is why the words are exciting of your founder, L. Ron Hubbard, in the creed of the Church of Scientology. The Church of Scientology, I know, has made a difference because your creed is a universal creed. I look forward to helping you bring about the difference for everyone in the city, this golden state of California, and from here, the nation, and from the nation, the world.
Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.